I made a bit of a revelation this week, and that's that most of the YouTube stars, they soften the shit out of their footage. Now, I understand it. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of them are well into their 80s and they're trying to portray the image of a middle-aged or younger man. And, you know, I do the same. I mean, creeping up on my mid to late 20s here, I kind of feel that need to beautify myself too. And I'm not going to lie to you, I like this look. So this is Nikon Z6. I think for way too long I tried to make it realistic. But it's not. I mean, there's detail there. You can see my smile lines. But this is basically everything turned down, sharpness, contrast. This is somber mode, which is a mode I always liked, but it was always just a little bit too kind of almost like pinkish purple tinge. So I took that saturation down, which is what started this all. I just started messing with settings. And it's a little bit overly glowy. If I do this again, I will probably adjust it slightly. It's just kind of a little bit too dreamy, though I do like the dreamy feel. So, and one thing though I really do like is it actually shows the color in my eyes a bit. I was wearing a green shirt earlier, which I have a lot of green in my eyes that doesn't usually get seen. So that pops it. So this video today, welcome back to Film-Studio-Taku. This is for those that actually like me, my weird quirkiness, my rants, and there is some information here about cameras. So if you're here for camera stuff, maybe stay, maybe kick it. But yeah, so I've been, as you probably noticed, a little bit all over the place with my content, and it's intentional. I'm kind of testing a few things out to see what really brings in views versus longevity of viewing, as in viewing hours, and of course subscribers. I don't think I've quite dialed in that formula, but I'm honing in on it. So going backwards a little bit, let's see, will it focus on the studio? No, I gotta step out. Yes, I have a big nose. Yes, I need to trim my nose hairs, I know. So before we start here, I wanna say, you know, I've been going back and forth between very messy and very clean. Right now it's kind of bordering on clean. Find me again, Nikon, there we go. Mind power. I realized something though, and this probably rings true with a lot of people, sort of twofold. For me, pride in studio. Okay, this whole room, as I mentioned in my last video, is a huge mess. Actually, now it's one corner. It was this whole side over there was a massive mess. There's a slight mess back here, but it's a pretty big room by Japanese standards. But that corner, it's getting condensed. There's definitely a lot of stuff there, but most things have been either organized or just thrown in drawers just to get them out of my face for a while, and I'll deal with it later. But pride in studio space, I think, is a very important thing as a YouTuber. And for me too, as a tinkerer, as someone who I will call myself an amateur self-taught engineer slash, I don't know, jack of all trades is not the term, but I'm somebody who has done a lot of different things in his life, and I've realized at a fairly late age in life, I did not do good in middle school, high school. I got by because I always did very good on tests, or at least good enough to keep going forward. But in general, certain things I did very, very well on in tests. I pretty much did not do my homework. During junior high school, I was absent more days than I was there, really. I was actually awarded the most absent in the school. There was actually 2 people, me and 1 girl, that got that award. And the irony is, the funny thing is that the day they took the pictures of everyone that filled that page with awards, she was there. She was there, and so she's in the picture with everyone else. I was not. Anyways, like I said, this is really more just if you like my weirdness, keep watching. If not, realizing like later in life, like I could learn just about anything if I really wanted to, if it was really interesting to me. And I almost want to say short of complex mathematics, but it's something that later in life I did some tests. I taught myself very quickly. I'm not going to say I got up to very high levels of math, but in about a week and a half, I surpassed everything I had learned. I relearned and surpassed everything that I was supposed to have learned in junior high school and high school, and did very well on some tests. So maybe, yeah, but I don't really have that desire right now. So, but I did build a lot of drones, several years back, and you know, I realized how much I really like doing like little detail things, and I don't know, organization, even though I'm not, if you look at this, you would think, oh my God, he's a slob, but when I have something I want to organize, I'm OCD, like I get down to the fine details, and that's why like some of my drones here, I think I'm going to open some up here and show you guys soon in another video, like just kind of what I did and why I'm kind of proud of those. But bringing it back to studio space, when I can actually have this clean behind me and when I feel like the lighting is nice, I like this right here. I like this color. A lot of times it's the same lights, but the settings in camera, I don't think they bring out the color that I'm trying to bring out. And this actually, wow, this is extremely color accurate to what, it's very color accurate to what it's on actually behind me and on the screen right now. So yeah, so I feel really good about it. And this is actually my skin tone, even though I'm not quite as baby smooth as this. Again, you know, at least in my early 20s now. But so yeah, so I think to others out there though, I think that might be something beneficial to you, is not just about building up your studio or, you know, having the RGBs. Although I would say at this point, if you want an RGB, I mean, I have, try not to blind you. I have used these in the background, but they're nice as little accents, these little Ulanzi RGBs. But these are magnetic, which is really nice. And I just bought 2 of these. I wanted to buy like a dozen of them. I had some projects I intended to do with a lot of them, but at that time, budgetary concerns as often as an issue in my life. And I'm sure in a lot of people out there's life. Which, bringing back to studio, is that just do what you can within your budget and make it something that you're proud of, something that you personally like the aesthetics. Whether or not it has the latest, greatest tech in it, it doesn't matter. Those lights that I do have in there, those are little strips. This one actually is geared for, or connecting to the actual, I have a controller that I don't use for it anymore. Let's see, can I get this to focus? I'll just bring it back to my eyes. These are just little, like, you know, RG strips that you can buy everywhere pretty much. You know, make sure that voltage matches what you're putting into them, or at least close. But yeah, these I have some that I bought a whole strip of, but then also for my little FPV drones, you know, I bought a bunch of frames on sale. I was just kind of lucky in that aspect, but I got more frames than I needed, and I use them for parts if I should ever damage one. But so I had all these extra little, I think 3, I like this length 3, this is probably one of them actually, I think 3 strips, and they're red or blue, and the blue was a really nice blue, so I really like them. I think there's 1 or 2 reds actually highlighting them back there, but anyways, all I did was I soldered them in line with each other and attached them to, you know, one piece. Again, I was lucky. I was, when I used to work for Personal View, he had, it wasn't Ulanzi, I'm gonna say it was GLM or whatever, GVM, I believe. Maybe they've come up since then, but they sent me an RGB unit that first time I tried to put USB power into it to charge it or power it, it fried it. It just totally started smoking and fried it. But you know, I tore it apart, and I actually put other RGBs in there, and it was working for a while. But in the long run, what I did is I took out the heatsink, which is just a really thin little aluminum heatsink, and I put these onto the heatsink so that back there, because they do get hot because I am running a little bit more voltage than they're actually supposed to be, which in theory is supposed to shorten their life. I mean, if you put too much voltage in it, you're going to pop them. But they've been running you know, since I've been doing this. I think it's a couple years now, and they get hot. I was actually worried about fire hazard and stuff, but I've intentionally left them on for extended periods while monitoring them. I don't know, I've probably done 4 to 5 hours with them on, and they've never gotten, they're hot, but they don't go overboard hot. And I do have them positioned in a way where hopefully if they catch on fire, bad things won't happen. So pride in studio. I just say, like, you know, little things, you know, also things that mean something to you. Like, see again if we can. That book is a very special book to me. A friend gave that to me, and yeah, there's more to it than that. But you know, the camera, that's a OM10 camera, film camera, which I have used recently, and it brings me back to my first experience with my father's. It wasn't an Olympus, it was a Pentax. I believe it was a Pentax, which I used to run around and shoot with, and which I have a permanent crack right here in my head because I was at a football game doing photos of our friends in high school, and at the end of the game they were throwing out prizes, and I jumped up to grab one, and the camera went up on the strap, and with the heavy metal lens, the corner, you know, the edge, it didn't have a lens hood on it, the metal corner just, I saw stars for a second there. I mean, it hurt, and there was a bump for at least a couple weeks. And yeah, they're still, I mean, it definitely cracked my skull. You can make some jokes right now about my intelligence, but I've always been weird. So yeah. So I didn't lie. We're going to talk about the Fuji XH2S and the XH2. Now, I already did some fairly extensive pre-release and after-release videos about the XH2S. The specs for both these cameras are out here. This is not what this is. I'm going to talk to you about the logistics of those cameras, whether or not they're the camera for you as an individual, and it depends on you as an individual. So this is something that goes beyond just these two cameras. I think it's something where there's obviously a fairly large group of people, you know, that have been doing this, you know, I mean, very large spectrum of how long you've been doing camera stuff, right? But I think that there's definitely a lot in my generation, in their early 20s, but people who got into decent cameras, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe only 5 years ago, a few, just a couple, 2 or 3 years ago. Let's just say 2 to 15 years ago group, okay? Now, you got in at a fairly good time, you know, the kind of the beginning of the mirrorless, and we've seen the evolution of this most modern iterations of camera, and most of us have an idea of what we want and where we're going with it. But some, you know, have been in Micro Four Thirds system the whole time, and I was in that group until 3 or 4 years ago when I switched to Nikon full frame. And yes, for those who don't know, I say Nikon because I am in Japan, and that's what they say, Nikon. So those groups may be considering an upgrade, so this is relevant to you. And then, of course, you have some that are in full frame that are considering whether or not they really need full frame, whether or not APS-C will hit the mark for them. And, you know, obviously the XH2S, particularly some of the specs there for certain things like wildlife photography, you know, it's a very tempting offer, and I was very tempted and almost jumped onto that camera. And then we have those that either just jumped into this technology in the last year or two. During COVID, at least in Japan, there has been a huge increase in families, young families walking around with Fujis and Olympus cameras and, you know, everything, but mostly Fujis and Olympuses. I see a lot of people with those in hand, and smaller Panasonics. So And then of course people just jumping in right now that are like, oh my, everybody else, they all have nice cameras for their family, and I saw their pictures and they look so nice, you know. Or they want, you know, obviously there's a huge spectrum. You want to do independent film, you want to take artistic photos. All of these things factor into whether or not something like an XH2 or an XH2S, you know, or another APS-C offering, or a full frame offering, or whether maybe even Micro Four Thirds is actually something that works for you better, or something like, it's back there somewhere, medium format, or at least GFX, which is not really true medium format, but it's bigger and in some ways better. So how do you know? How do you know if these are the cameras for you? So some of the biggest determining factors are, what are your intentions with your photos? Now, if it's just to have higher quality images to share on social media or make small prints, you know, if you're nostalgic and you would like a photo book, Micro Four Thirds will get you there. It really will. And in each of these, there's a whole other spectrum, which is the lenses. And I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but I'm just gonna say here right now, a good lens, not necessarily an expensive lens, but a good lens that offers you low light capability and a focal length which flatters the subject that you're shooting, is the world of difference in every system. Because you could have a great lens that just doesn't match your style of shooting, and you're never gonna feel it. You're never gonna have those results you want. You know, you could have a kit lens that's amazing and it's perfect for you, and there's no reason to upgrade. But in general, I say read up on lenses really quickly. Faster the lens, in other words, if it's f2 or less, in general, in each system, you're going to have better results in regards to portraiture. If it's in general somewhere in the 85 millimeter, let's say 50 millimeters to 135 millimeter range of, you know, that's how far in the lens is zoomed, whether it's a prime, meaning that it's fixed, or whether it actually, you can actively zoom in and out. But if you have in that range for portraits, you're looking really good. But keep in mind that that range is not very wide. 50 on a full frame is fairly wide, but in general, you're gonna have to back up to get everyone in the shot if you have like a family portrait or something like that. 2 lenses in general is a better approach, to have something somewhat wide and then have something like that. If you only have 2 lenses, choose a portrait range lens and a wide lens between, let's say, 15 millimeter to 35 millimeter, depending on the system, depending on your needs. And in each case, do your best to keep the f-stop as low as possible. It doesn't have to be, you know, f2 or lower, but in general, it's a good idea. Something to know, the more you zoom in, you have more bokeh. So in other words, you know, an f4 lens at 135 millimeters can actually create very nice bokeh and subject separation from the background, so it can look good. So that's about all I'm going to say about lenses for the moment. Bird photographers, that's something that you should at least know a little bit of something about or study on your own, because that's a whole other thing and a whole other price range in general. So with the camera system, each sensor size is dependent and also changes how that all works. A Micro Four Thirds, to simplify, okay, if you haven't seen these videos, and this is another reason I'm doing this, is because a lot of this information, you know, these videos, they're 10 years ago, a lot of people put out videos explaining all this, and there's not a lot of new ones. In regards to sensor size, the Micro Four Thirds is approximately 2 times the depth of field. So if you have an f2 lens on a Micro Four Thirds, it's the equivalent of an f4 lens on a full frame sensor. Now APS-C is somewhere in the middle. So on a APS-C, it would be equivalent of an f3 on a full frame sensor. So, and then you go into medium format, I'll touch there real quick. It's 7.9 crop. So in other words, if you had an f2, it would be a f1.58. No, yes, f1.58 on a medium format sensor. So you get more bokeh. But keep in mind that lenses for Micro Four Thirds and APS-C are APS-C, I'm going to say never, but there might be one lens somewhere that I don't know about. But in general, never going to cover the full medium format sensor. You'll have a circle in the image you're taking, like a pinhole basically. So, or like a peephole from a door. So, full frame lenses though, there are quite a few full frame lenses. I have been using some Nikon lenses on my GFX with an adapter, and they've been surprisingly good. Not all of them, and not always the ones that you think should work, but anyways. So, okay, we got lenses covered. We got the way that the depth of field affects your sensor. Another major factor is light, and it is relevant to lenses because the smaller the number, I am simplifying this for, you know, people that know it, you know what I'm saying. People that don't, the smaller that number, the more light is coming into your lens, because all that means, the smaller the number is, the larger the aperture actually opens, so it lets in more light. Now, related to that, the larger your sensor is, in general, the larger each pixel is. So the larger the pixel is, the more photons hit the actual pixel. Like, imagine the pixel as an individual sensor. The larger the sensor, pixel sensor is, the more light is able to get onto that. And thus, your low light capabilities are increased. And along with that comes lower noise, higher dynamic range, and just an overall cleaner looking image. Now, the caveat to that, or rather the exception to that, is that some cameras, their sensors, regardless of size, have a lot more pixels. You know, 50 megapixels on a APS-C sensor, that's a lot of pixels. The XH2, but it does seem to be handling it fairly well. Okay, but I'm gonna step all over some people's toes here. Okay, the Nikon Z9, a very, very popular full frame camera, kind of the hardest camera to get, is 50 megapixels on a full frame sensor, and it's not unheard of. But I've used that camera quite a bit, side by side with my Nikon Z6, with lots of different lenses, and a few, but the Nikon Z9 clearly has more detail, clearly looks great in 99% of the situations you would use it in. When it gets into the fine line of what's too much low light versus, you know, or what you can get away with in low light, the Z6 is better. The Z6 is 24.5 or something like that megapixels, and those pixels are large. They're the same size as my GFX 100, believe it or not, 100S, but it's they're basically the exact same size pixels. And for that reason, both the GFX 100S and the Z6 render in a very pleasing way. It's not just about the noise levels, it's about the type of noise. The noise looks film-like, cinematic. It looks like fine grain, and even when it's like larger looking grain due to really low light, it just maintains a film-like structure. The Z6, which I've shot extensively in low light, because actually the first 3 times I believe that I was allowed to use a friend's camera, it was not very good lighting. It was overcast or getting near sunset. And I did get some great photos. Again, I'm glad I used it, because like Aogera photos, it's a green woodpecker basically here in Ao means blue, but Ao and green are interchangeable in Japan. But yeah, it's a very rare, difficult to see close up because they're very shy of people. A woodpecker, there was one nested in a tree very close to the edge trail of a park that I frequent. And I was so glad I had the Z9 with the 800mm S lens on there. And I did shoot with the Z6 as well. Both did very well. But globally, the Z9 images look better, but when you zoom into them, they have this almost like a little worm pattern of grain, similar to what you see on some smartphones when you zoom in. And I know that's right there where a lot of Z9 owners probably just like, ooh. But let me just say this, I still want a Z9, and I still might get one someday. We'll see. But again, globally it looks great, and I'm sure with the right software you can clean that up and make it look great. But for whatever reason, the noise pattern on the Z9 is, to me, displeasing. Now, most of the times you're not going to see it, because most of the times there's not going to be any noise. It's only when you get into that, like above ISO 8000, definitely ISO 12800, which I shot at a lot for the Augera, because it was the babies. The last baby left the nest right before sunset, and it was already in a shaded area, so there was really no other choice, especially with the 6.3 lens, the 800mm. I talked a little bit, probably too much, about those cameras specifically, but I just kind of want to give you an idea that higher megapixels is not always a better picture. It can be more detail, and if you have lots of light, that definitely works to your advantage. But if you're working in low light, lower megapixels are your friend in general. So with the Fujifilm cameras, what you are getting is a fairly good sized sensor, something capable of low light, but it's not going to be the best. It's going to give you, though, some very cool simulations, and what they really are is just kind of, you know, it's Fujifilm. Getting my quotes over here. Quote. It's Fujifilm because film is what Fuji's been doing for generations. And for that reason, they know what film is supposed to look like. They know what the colors are supposed to look like. They are comparing it directly to their film stock and creating looks that are very accurate. And whether or not you like a certain look, they're looks that many people grew up with. You know, whether they were the ones actually taking the photos or they were looking through photo books of their parents or grandparents, it's a look that they're accustomed to and brings feelings of nostalgia, you know, happiness, sadness, all kinds of things. Nostalgia and emotions are a very, very powerful tool. And, you know, cameras, more than just about any tool on the planet, are able to utilize that. Probably more than any other tool on the planet. So Fuji is really, really good at that. And I think that's a primary incentive for most people, whether they know it or not. If you want a camera that allows you to shoot photos that look like they're out of a film camera, Fuji lets you step into that very quickly and easily with very little involvement other than you should learn your settings. You should learn ISO, film speed, aperture, what else? You know, I would say maybe take control of your white balance, but auto white balance works pretty good these days. So yeah. Now, why would you maybe not want to do Fuji? Well, it goes back into the sensor size and low light, dynamic range, depth of field. Stepping up to full frame, you get into a realm where there is just an atmosphere in the image, especially using a good lens, that you can't quite get with APS-C. You can get atmosphere, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't get atmosphere. I'm not saying you can't get bokeh. I'm not saying you can't get magic, but there is more atmosphere. There is a more je ne sais quoi quality, just like going up from micro four thirds though to APS-C. So if you're in micro four thirds, APS-C might be the solution for you because you're gonna definitely be taking a big step upwards. But full frame also allows you to go into the night with a lot more confidence that you're going to get clean images, or if there is noise, it's going to be a lot more acceptable noise in more situations. And again, I'm going to keep going back, but I'm not saying that APS-C can't give you nice low light images. And the grain sometimes, again, going back to nostalgia and images that are accepted, you know, images have had grain in them, you know, from film cameras for a long time. When you shoot in low light, is kind of just a given, and it can be artistic. And this is where you also have to ask your question. Are you, the question, are you looking for, like I said, just family stuff? Or are you actually considering being either a professional photographer, or do you simply want to create for yourself and for your friends and share artistic images, you know? Because Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, any social media, you know, any camera can do decent video as far as TikTok goes. But, you know, are you wanting to just share your images that look nice, or are you wanting to kind of be like, I'm an artist, or, you know, trying to share your art, you know, in a way that is artistic? So if that's the case, you're definitely, I think you're pretty much gonna want to do at least APS-C. The only exception with Micro Four Thirds is getting some very nice lenses like Voigtlander lenses that are f.95, or some good Zeisses or Leicas. Anyways, but still, I love Voigtlander lenses, but my Micro Four Thirds with a Voigtlander, you know, stepping up to a Nikon full frame with a budget lens, it's just overall it's worth the trade-off, even if you lose a little bit of that inherent magic in that lens, because it's so much easier to work the images in post and get the magic back and more. So yeah, so APS-C for art, but full frame also for art, and full frame if you really know that you want to stretch the limits as far as low light goes. And look, the bottom line is, for full frame, you're going to be able to print stuff larger without sacrificing. You're not going to have as much noise. You're going to have, in general, more detail. Yes, the pixels are, you know, you're getting there now where you have 50 megapixel APS-C, but there's just something. It's detail's the wrong word, but there's something when you look at a full frame file where it tells your eyes somehow that there's more information in there. And like I said earlier, more atmosphere. And so yeah, full frame is a step up for sure from APS-C, but you don't need to go there unless you want to print large, and unless you know you have professional quality or professional clients that, you know, that's what they want. But if I'm giving my honest advice, for the price of an XH2 or an XH2S, unless video specs are the thing you need the most, and in the case of the XH2S, which also happens to be the best video specs, but you also want high-speed photos, like doing really fast sports or birds in flight, fast birds in flight, because you can do birds in flight with just about any camera. It's just that if you're doing something that's moving really fast or unpredictably, then you start to want something with higher specs, being able to shoot very fast, being able to track very fast, being able to predict movements, and that's something like an XH2S, a Z9, R3. Anyways, there's a lot of cameras that are capable of it, but yeah. But what I was driving at here, that unless you need those two things, Nikon Z6, it is by far the most dollar, yen, wherever you are, to performance friendly camera out there. What you get out of a Nikon Z6 in terms of video specs, and you're looking at the video right now, right? Aren't I beautiful? Tracking, I just set it to, so I actually made this video, this is a remake of this video because I had some problems. It was tracking slowly and smoothly, but a little bit too slowly. So this time I just, rather than fiddle around a bunch, I just went to the opposite end, which I knew was gonna be a little bit jerky. So when you look, I come in, there's gonna be that little extra pulse. And that's something I could actually fix in the Tamron lens with fine tuning, but also just by toning down that in the camera, it won't do that jerk. But you know, the bottom line is it's keeping me quickly. Making me look like a Jabba the Hutt. But yeah, it's staying on me, you know, it's not losing me at all. So it can be fine-tuned. But yeah, photo quality, the Z6 is absolutely professional. You absolutely don't need more than 24 megapixels to print pretty damn big and to be a professional photographer. A Z6 is going to be considered professional by any client you walk in on. And in a rare case where somebody says, no, we need to print larger than that, we need something 50 megapixels or 100 megapixels, which is very rare, very rare. But you're going to be able to just go rent one and keep the Z6, because the Z6 is such a good all-around camera. And like I said, the price, you can get one used for what, $1,000. So for the price of one XH2S, you can get two. Pretty much the price of one XH2, you can get two Z6s, or get a Z6 and a little Nikon APS-C, a Z50. This thing is not bad. You know, it's an underrated camera. It's not an XH2S, but I think that just like the Z6, the focus tracking and the auto exposure on the Z50 and the Z6, it's so good. I'm actually in auto ISO right now, and I don't think you've seen any drastic shifts, have you? It's staying with me pretty well. And I got varied lighting going on here, so like when I move around, it is changing the brightness on my face, but it's recovering very quickly. So yeah, and there's another camera. We're going to go into one other camera that is budget friendly for what it is, and it's such an underdog, is the Sigma FP, the original FP. The FPL is also very interesting. The reason the FP is so efficient price-wise is because of the way it records media and the fact that it can record true RAW. A lot of people don't realize so many of the RAW formats that were being marketed towards us are not actually RAW. They are compressed. Anyways, they're not true RAW. The Sigma FP records raw DNG files. In other words, each frame is an actual photo image, true, full raw image. So it records that. It gives you the option to record that to a USB hard drive through a USB connector. So that right alone there, I can talk tea. So that right there is worth the price of admission, in my opinion. The Sigma FP, you know, the only thing you can say is that it doesn't have great autofocus, and you know, it's limited in some ways, like as far as functionality goes. But if you want a cinematic camera, if you want to make a movie on a budget, and I'm not just talking like an art house movie, like you can make an actual full movie on that. It is raw DNG. 4K is going to outshine so many 6K, 8K, you know, options out there. It's just your flexibility in editing and just the amount of pure detail in the image. It's gonna look better. You know, a lot of people don't know that Lord of the Rings, the original ones, were not even 4K. So take that to the bank. I mean, seriously, if you think you need 4K, 8K, 6K, whatever, no, no, you don't. And yes, it's nice. Sure, I would love an 8K raw DNG camera. Sure, why not? But it's not needed for making a movie. The Sigma FP, you know, it's so versatile in what it can do, how it can be set up, you know, using manual focus lenses, as you should be for making an actual movie, follow focus, locked off shots, or flying it on a gimbal, or flying it on a drone. I don't think there's another camera out there that can do DNG raw and be put on a drone and be lighter than pretty much any full frame APS-C camera out there. It's just, yeah, that's one of those cameras where it's like, every time I am upgrading or needing to buy a new camera, I'm just like, I should just get an FP. I should just get an FP because I really want to play with it. It's such a interesting camera to me. The logical part of my brain hasn't jumped there yet, because I'm like, well, A, for what I'm doing right now, I don't really need it. B, it's gonna get cheaper. Maybe, I don't know. That might be one of those cameras where suddenly you can't get them anymore, and everyone kind of realizes what they've missed and why that's such a great camera. And maybe they all watched this video and they're like, damn, he's right. And then I'm scrambling to get one. You fuckers, you're not supposed to actually watch this. I was expecting 200 views over a year tops. Okay, so I don't know, you know, like I said, this is a remake, and I feel like the other one was a little bit more on the points I wanted to get to, but I think I got most of it across here. I think if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. I do, in general, answer all questions as long as they're respectful and on point. So let me know, like, if you have a particular camera you're looking at and interested in, let me know. If you have questions about it, I'll do my best to answer them, especially since I did just finish over the whole entire summer debating which camera to get, and went with GFX 100S and the Z50 as a little B camera. But, you know, I was very deep in checking specs and checking, you know, like what the options are and what the advantages of each were. And I should probably do a more direct video on that, but I kind of am wanting to do off-script stuff for a little while here because I don't know. I don't know. Let me know if you enjoy this type of content, though. Let me know if you prefer my scripted stuff or just, you know, me walking around Tokyo. You know, I definitely have seen recently from thumbnails that I've been experimenting with that, as I suspected, people do like looking at cute Japanese girls. And, well, I pretty much just have to step out of my door for that. And I'm going to be doing a gimbal. I have a gimbal. I've had it forever, but the weight is, with the GFX, oh my God, I'm going to break my back. But yeah, my next time out, my plan is to do a gimbal because I know that last footage I did was not super stable. That was a GFX 100S, by the way, with stabilization on, and not impressed with Fuji's stabilization. It just jerks. It's just, it needs some fine tuning. It needs the ability to set, like how Olympus EMX1 has, like, you can actually adjust its, almost like a gimbal, how the stabilization works. I think Fuji needs to offer something like that to users so that we can do better than what they're doing with their settings. And Nikon would never do that. I might just have to take the Z6 out. If I'll do the gimbal with the Fuji GFX one time, and I have a feeling that I'm never going to want to do it again. So next one I'll be with a Z50 after that, or the Z6 is, you know, Z50 stabilization by its own is not great, but I can put it on a smaller gimbal, which I've seen locally for a very good price at a recycle shop, thrift store. We call them recycle shops here. So the Z6, though, you know, with the Tamron 35, the stabilization in that lens is so good, and on the Z6 it just does so well, especially if you turn on the internal stabilization. So I think if you want to know, like, about GFX, watch my other GFX videos. And there's more coming. There's definitely more coming. The GFX, I'll just say in short, that's only if you want that extreme resolution for landscapes. You know, I'm going to be doing some you know, nighttime sky stuff with it. That's one of the reasons I bought it too. I want to see how well it does. I've been doing a lot of that stuff with my Z6, and I was never disappointed with it. But there, you know, there's a limit to what I could pull out of it, and I would like to see if I can do more with the GFX. I should be able to, obviously. And so yeah, I think for that camera, you're either printing super large for your business or for, you know, freelance work, or you're doing landscapes where you really need the detail, and not all landscapes really need that much detail. You know, 24 megapixels is enough for most. Some would even say 12 or less is enough, but for where I am, you know, in Japan, there's a lot of ocean scenery with a lot of vegetation near the ocean, and I get just kind of almost stressed when I'm looking at vegetation that just looks soft and I can't see the details in it. So the GFX 100S gets closer to what I would like to have it be. I think we need to eventually get to 200 megapixels on a true medium format sensor. I think that's the future that we're heading towards, which is probably 20 years away. But yeah, you know, I've said it before, and obviously the information's out there, but full frame sensor on a film camera is generally considered to be about 200 megapixels of actual resolution. So it's not such a unreasonable thing to want, you know, to get back to where we were before we went to digital. Digital is a huge step down. It's amazing that the masses accepted it, you know, when they did, but it's getting back to, yeah, it's getting back there. It's close enough, but I'm that person that just always craves more detail in my images, so we'll see. And by the way, model stuff is coming. I'm working on it. That's part of what's going on here. I'm converting this to a actual studio for photography, and I'm going to work on getting some cute girls in here to do some photos of. So T-mid style. T-mid, you inspire me, and yeah. It's a little trickier here though. Japanese girls are very shy, but I'm trying to do my best without going through an agency because I don't have the funds for that right now. I do know a couple models, but scheduling and all that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to get some new models to work with me. So thanks for watching Film-Studio-Taku Japan. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.